Hi, my name is Minda Hartz, and I'm your host of Secure the Seat here on LinkedIn. I apologize. We had some streaming issues, but I hope we're back in the game. I am so excited to have you here with us, but I'm also excited to have Dia Sims. I have been following Dia's career for a very long time, and when I reached out to the community, I said, who do you want to see me in conversation with? And Dia, your name came up in droves. And so thank you and welcome to Secure the Seat.
Thank you so much. We're so happy to be here. Hello to everybody. Thank you, Minda. Congratulations again on the memo.
Thank you so much. Such a pleasure. Thank you for joining in today. And thank you for having lunch with us. So you know that we meet here on noon on Eastern time to have lunch together and talk about leadership issues. If you're in the chat box, put your questions in there for Dia because we'll make sure that we get them here today. Don't leave without your question being at least put in the chat box today. But Dia, tell everybody a little bit about you who may not know about your path.
Yeah, absolutely. So I worked in a variety of professions. I started out after college in the Department of Defense and then did a ton of things, mostly in advertising and sales, et cetera. And after working at a radio station in New York, I received a call from one of the execs from Bad Boy Records saying that Puff Daddy, Brother Love, Sean Combs, just don't call him late for dinner, was hiring for a chief of staff position and would I be interested in interviewing for it. At that time, I didn't have any specifically relevant background in that. I was 29 years old. I had mostly been in sales and contracts, marketing type stuff. But I went to the interview, were really well, and they offered me the job. But they said, Puff is concerned because you haven't managed really large teams before. Would you be willing to come on board as an executive assistant instead of chief of staff? And I often say, like, I don't care what you call me. You can call me a janitor, but this is what I need to make, and I'll be there. I started off as Sean's executive assistant, October 5th, 2005, I believe it was. 2005 for sure. And then within the company grew to eventually become the first president of Combs Enterprises in 2017.
I love it. I love it. There's so much wrapped in there. And I want to touch on some of that. So you went from executive assistant to president. How has your leadership style changed since then? Or how has it evolved?
So I think I have always believed very much that everyone has something to learn and everyone has something to teach. So that hasn't changed. In fact, I can fast forward to times when people would come to me and say, well, people do things because you're the boss. And I'm like, no, people did things when I was the executive assistant. So I think the thing is, it's a matter of like, are you having a respectful, requited relationship with the people all around you, right? Because the reality is, there's an inclination sometimes of people to view certain functions as disposable and certain functions as indispensable, and what a boss means versus what an assistant means. And I'm obviously front seat, having sat in it, extremely clear about how each member is valuable, no different than the way a military moves or a football team moves or a ballet or a symphony, whatever your title is, whatever level you may be from a pay grade standpoint, your role was created for an important reason. I think, and if you treat it with the same discipline and love and care that it deserves, hopefully you get that back. And for me, from a leadership standpoint, it was always incredibly important to be really respectful of everybody around me. Now, that said, to be very clear, the Combs Enterprises mantra is very can't stop, won't stop, get it done by any means necessary. So I think the intensity, the pace, and the expectations of a commitment to excellence were certainly challenging for all of us involved, up to and including Puff Daddy, right? But that doesn't mean, even if you're working around the clock, you can't say please and thank you. It doesn't mean you don't respect people as total people. And those are some of the tenets that were important to me in leadership.
Yeah, I love those tenets, and that's really important. And I also want to touch on something you mentioned, that when you started at Combs Enterprise, you were the executive assistant, and you talked about not really caring so much about the title, but is this a place you can learn? Tell us more about what you mean, because I feel like sometimes we get caught up in the titles, and there's other things to consider as well.
Yeah, especially when you're starting out in your career, which, honestly, I think it can be very difficult. It can be daunting. I think there's a lot of pressure when you're 22, 23, even 29, 30 to be like, I got to pick it and make the exact decision. I think it's important to be flexible, more flexible about titles, lean towards places where you can shine. And for me, I was never so much about what my title was. I was very much concerned about, is this a place I can grow and learn? I'm a super geek and I love I love getting information, learning as much as I possibly can. And in all honestly, and many of us have experienced this, I've had some great bosses before him and I had some not so great bosses before him. And there's been times where I've been places where like, I'm not learning anything. So the number one thing that was most exciting to me when I planned to come over to Combs Enterprises was like, I have no doubt this is a man I can learn from. This is a place where I can learn. And that honestly was the thing that was most enticing about the opportunity.
Yep. And I'm sure people always ask you, did you have to go and get the cheesecake? Is that what
I did not. I did not have to get the cheesecake. No. In fact, we instead made a lot of cash so we could buy a lot of cheesecake through our Ciroc Vodka venture together.
I like that. I like that. And another leadership question that I have for you is, I know that a lot of leaders right now are finding it extremely difficult to lead during a health and racial pandemic. Do you have any advice on how to lead through adversity, hard times, and what that kind of looks like?
Yeah, it's challenging for everybody involved. And I think it's a certain additional level of expectation thrust upon leaders in every organization. I think the thing to be important is that the thing to bear in mind is you all have the ability to lead, right? So it doesn't matter if you're the general manager or the EVP, right? Whatever your title is, you have the capacity for leadership in some way, particularly right now when we're looking for leaders in humanity. So I think don't hesitate to be the person on the Zoom call, no matter what your title is, to acknowledge what's happening, to acknowledge what people are going through. I am so motivated and so inspired by seeing a generation who are really leading the country, no matter what their age or title or skin color. So I think as leaders, when you think through the way you engage on these endless Zooms or conference calls, to be really mindful of what everybody's experience is all around the table with transparency and honesty wherever you can be. One of the biggest challenges in this country, frankly, I think, is we've been very constrained through political correctness. We've been very constrained, frankly, from the allowance of too much litigation. So it's hard to have an honest and frank conversation that you could have. There were a lot of things that weren't great 50 years ago, but this was one I think that was where you could actually have a more honest conversation. Yeah. Because we're not going to change anything. If you look at the advancements, limited but forward, in the women's movement in the last 5 years, men have to be a part of that, right? So I think the same way when you have a work environment, the things that are going on now, specifically talking about some of the racial bias issues, you got to be able to have a conversation with white Americans and Black Americans and Americans of every ethnicity to progress it. And it's really hard to do that in the workplace. But I will tell you, I'm extremely impressed because for the last 3 weeks, I have had more of them than I've had in the last 25 years of my career, which is inspiring. I think in terms of health in general, we have to really remember that no matter, I know this is like a LinkedIn, so we're all about making sure that we're working and we're all focused on when we're going to be able to get our retirement check. But the reality is we are working, hopefully, to better the wholeness of our lives, right? The love in our lives, our family, our friends, whatever your passion is, skateboarding or swimming or whatever it is. So you have to understand how, health is everything. It is absolutely everything. My mother has progressive multiple sclerosis she had since I was 9 years old. She's very positive, but she went from running like 6 miles every morning before taking us to school to not being able to walk. And I have never taken for granted that, like, if I can get out of bed in the morning and my feet hit the ground, like, I'm very, very grateful. Anything else, any dollar, any praise, any acknowledgments I get after that is added value. We need to treat our teams in that same way, right? So when people have legitimate like sicknesses, they are not at their best. I'm not even talking about the pandemic. So about last year when people were like, I have to go to work sick because I don't have PTO. That is to no one's benefit. And it's no way you're going to be able to retain employees that way. And you would do better to worry about to not worry about the 12% or less of people who maybe they take advantage and get a free day off to do whatever they have to do, because people also do need some mental breaks, versus being really supportive of when people need to support not just their health, but their families. Puff did a beautiful thing years ago when my father is like very strong, ex-black belt, military police. And I'm at work and I get the call from my mom that my father just like collapsed, like couldn't walk. And the ambulance came to get him. And so I didn't even tell Papa, I just walked out. Somebody let him know, and he on his own, without even reaching me, found out where we were, arranged to have my father move from like not a great hospital to the best hospital in the city, phenomenal care. A, I don't think these stories get told about him enough, but B, the loyalty you get out of an employee for taking an extra step about somebody's care, you know what I mean, is so much beyond any bonus, any day off, any vacation. So when people have health issues personally and professionally, and they are good employees, like support them with your whole mind and heart.
Yeah, that was such a word in there, and it's nice when you do have, colleagues, managers that are invested in your whole success, right? Because
Yes.
if your family is taken care of, then you're mentally taken care of.
Exactly.
So I'm glad you put that, because we really have to humanize the workplace. We're not just robots. We have lives, and part of getting, as you mentioned, getting the best out of your employees is being a good leader, being empathetic, right?
Yes.
Not just looking at the analytics, but also analyzing what's going on with your employees, right? So I love that you talked about that. Right now, I just want to remind you to go ahead and put your questions in the comment box, or send me a message so that I can get them, so that we can make sure that you ask the questions that you want to ask Dia while you have her here at lunch with you. But one of the things I have to ask you, Dia, I am a lover of grits and rap lyrics, and I can't let you leave the show without telling us what your favorite rap lyric is and why.
So it's gonna sound biased, but legit, even before I worked there, my favorite would be the first verse, Puff's first verse in Victory, like the sun gonna shine forever. But that's definitely my favorite.
I love it. I love it. And just give us a little more, dig a little deeper. Why do you like that verse? Why does it resonate with you?
You know what hits on just from musically, I think it has that like epic, I can take over the world feeling. So honestly, even if nobody said a word, the beginning musically is something like, if you about to go into a big meeting, it just feels like your warm-up theme song, I'm about to take over the world. And then the points he hits on legitimately are the things that just resonate with me, right? In terms of like, the sun doesn't shine forever. Like, I'm a big believer in how I live my life. I'm hopeful I live another 50 years, but I live my life like I might not. And I think you got to think through, like, what do you get out of every bit of your minute? Like, if you don't, forgive the cliche, but like, if you don't run the day will run you. At 44, I've seen so many people literally talking about the same thing for 24 years and have made no movement with their feet or hands towards it. Like, it's a real thing. The sun will not shine forever, not for you. Life is finite, and you should move and act accordingly. And then and I think the point is just like, honestly, just the first two lines, even before we get to the rest of it, that line and the second line of like, why don't we shine together? Right. And I'm not trying to, I feel like, but I mean, it's a real thing. Like, I don't, this is a common thing. And a good friend of mine says this all the time, that the world is abundant. Right. And that for me, there is nothing, you don't have to feel like there's one chance or there's one slot. In my experience, all the best and greatest things that have had to me, I think they seem to have an amazing correlational effect of me trying to do some kindness to somebody else. So there is enough for all of us. Like, let us hold hands. Let us make sure that we're lifting all of us up in concert, because it just makes all of us better. So to me, even before you get to the rest of it, because that'll be a whole hour, but those first two lines, are so motivating.
Yeah, I love that. And, I truly believe that success is not a solo sport, and we can't shine together. There's room for all of us to
all of us.
Okay. Yeah. So let's strategically plot and plan so that we can all shine together.
Yes.
The last thing I wanted to ask you is, as our leaders are watching us in conversation today, what is one tip that you would give them to make the workplace better than we found it?
I don't even know. You talk about how has this last year changed the world forever? I don't see us ever returning to the 5-day work week for most professions. So I say one tip is to be thoughtful about, one, how are you trusting professionals to be able to work to achieve the goals that you've clearly set out in front of them? Eliminate busy work and people showing you that they're doing things, but they're actually just an octopus on roller skates, moving but not getting anywhere. I would encourage us to be really specific about the expectations that we look for our teams, which will help you be more measurable and help them be more clear about what goal they're going towards, and then empower them to show off what they're great at doing versus standing in front of you for 9 hours a day, which is often counterproductive. And often people are making up things to do versus actually accomplishing things you want them to do.
Yeah, I love that advice. And that's important. And I don't think we're going back. There's no going back to normal. We get to, the cool thing about right now is we get to define what success looks like going forward. You know, before we were told and we were in these boxes, now we get to maneuver. And I really love that. And I'm going to take a couple questions from the chat. We have, Dia, talk about the skills needed to discuss at the, let me see. Talk about the skills needed or discussed at the table required by interns. How do you recruit? And then as an educator, is it important for me to remain current in preparing students for their next level?
Yes, so for internships or any entry-level roles, I think the important thing is, again, to be flexible, get in the door. Just kind of reiterating the same point, but you know, many people are like, well, I studied this one thing, I want to do this one thing. There's an organization where you think you can thrive and you had planned to be an accountant, but you need to go and take a different role. Just get in the door and prove yourself and be willing to be nimble and flexible, get in an environment and show them why you're worth it. In terms of so as an educator, to that question, there's a larger issue in certain gaps in the education system that by a single educator even trying to make some of the adjustments will help all of us. I think one is in teaching negotiation. It's a huge gap in most people don't. I was really fortunate that I worked for the Department of Defense right after college. I was literally sent to like negotiation training on how to negotiate contracts for 2 years. Most people don't get that training, and it's obvious when you see people in a room trying to negotiate a deal and or try to even negotiate or advocate for their own next salary raise. People need to learn logic. It's one thing maybe you do, but I remember in 7th grade being taught when you argue, and this again is the whole thing, when you argue, you attack the issue, not the person. When you argue, what is circular reasoning? Like, I think some of that is a major gap. And then real life skills. Just again, like in my mid-20s, I used to work for this guy still around, famous big club owner named Mark Barnes in the DC area. If anyone knows Park, Love, Public Gardens, depending on how old you are. So the very first day, he had hired a bunch of us to come, hired about 7 of us to start and do promotions. The day we showed up on our first day, he sent all of us home. He said, go home, go pick up your cleaning, clean your house, empty your dishwasher, pay all your bills, because when you start, we're going to be working around the clock. And to be honest, it's an interesting thing. Like if a person doesn't know, educators opportunity to say, this is how you run your life. You know what I mean? This is how you run your life so you can be better at whatever profession you take on.
Yep, I love that answer. And we'll squeeze another one in here. We got a lot of yes and amens. Going I don't know if LinkedIn was ready for that. But one of the questions here is, what do you do? What have you done to stay motivated in your career to keep moving forward?
Yeah, so when I was growing up, a lot of people stayed at jobs for like 10, 20 years. I didn't do that. Honestly, it's probably very anti-LinkedIn, but I jumped around a lot because in order to get significant salary raises, you can just look at the research. Like you stay at one place, average, you get 2% year over year. You move to a new place, you get big jumps. So I wasn't scared to like, I'm doing the next thing. And like in my 20s, I worked at AstraZeneca, I worked at GlaxoSmithKline, I worked at CBS Radio. And I feel very confident that if I came for 15 months, I over-delivered for those 15 months and then went to the next place. So don't be afraid to try different things, I think, and move around.
Yeah. Okay. I lied. One last question I'll take. And then since we had some technical difficulties, we'll take one more. What advice do you have for people who need to have those courageous conversations in the workplace? And I think right now people are probably having, like you said, having the conversations that we haven't been able to have for so long. How do you bring those up, or any tips?
Yeah, I recommend bringing like a dispassionate objective tool. So if you're not familiar with this, please Google, I forget the woman's name offhand, but it was like a teacher, to shout out to the educators again, a woman who ran like an experiment on a 1st grade class called Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes. Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes. If you're not familiar with it, look it up. They actually did a great retrospective on it recently. And I love this tool because it does the talking for you, and it helps to explain how very quickly, this teacher took kids who were blue-eyed and brown-eyed, segregated them, and showed them, this is a white teacher in an all-white class, by the way, in a very small town, all-white town. And she basically one day after I think after MLK was assassinated, essentially went to the blue eyes and said, blue eyes, you're not as smart just because you have blue eyes. And so you're not going to be as good at this. And blue eyes, I expect you to make these mistakes. And then flip the experiment. The interesting result of it is within 48 hours, the kids, as an example, who were told that they were subpar because they were blue-eyed, started to do poorly on their tests, started fighting, started crying, to the point, it's actually happened in reverse, but you'll bear with me on the point, that blue eyes started to become like a slur. Just a week ago, you would have been like, I'm a blue-eyed kid, I'm blue-eyed first grader, but the brown eyes would be like, you blue-eyed, and they'd be like, he called me blue eyes within 2 days, right? So it's a wonderful, dispassionate way to show somebody. You have to understand, like, racism is not a theory. Like, this is not something that people of color are saying, like, oh, we're like, look at the science of how it actually affects both sides. And it also is interesting because it shows the other side, where the kids who were felt superior just because they were brown-eyed, obviously all this is foolishness and not real, they were saying things like, I felt like a king when I was told. They started to do better on their tests. They started to do, and again, this is in under a week. Yeah. So I think it's a great example to show, well, what if this was happening for centuries to an entire population of people? How would that affect both sides? How is to our mutual detriment? And I think if you have to have a courageous conversation and you say, look, I want to talk to you about something because I'm concerned about the way I think our workplace is part of the problem. And I want to be part of the solution. Would you watch this for me? And let's talk tomorrow about how we make sure we're not driving this in the words that we use, in the expectations that we set, in the parity in which we are treating one another. And if there are gaps anywhere, how are we holding hands in honesty and getting into a room and making it nobody's, so you can be honest and have a real conversation, because nothing's going to work if we're having these conversations in silos.
That's such. I know the chat is like blowing up. They're saying Jane Elliott.
Yeah, thank you, Jane Elliott. Yes, thank you.
That was such a great example, and we have so many tools. To your point, that we could say, you know what, take a look at this, read this. Let's have a follow-up conversation, and we don't have to get our feelings involved, so to speak, right? They come because they're part of who we are, but
they're valid.
Yeah. And they're valid, and we can add some other tools to our toolkit. There's another great commercial by Heineken. It was a few years ago, and they put a bunch of different people together in a room, and at the end of they all thought differently, right? So somebody was maybe racist at one point in their lives, and then they were paired with like a Black woman, right? And they put them in this situation, and at the end they all kind of, once they got to know each other, they humanized each other. So all these thoughts that they once thought about that person, they were able to share a beer at the end. Now I know,
I have to look that up.
But it's a really great commercial, and I think that's another one that people can think about. But how can people support you? We appreciate your leadership right now, but where can people find you, support you, bring you in to speak?
Yes, no, thank you. I'm at Dia Sims, just my name on all social media, so just add Dia Sims. And actually, but while we have this great audience, I am involved in a couple different businesses, and I'm looking for a few roles, so it will be helpful if anyone knows somebody really senior at the e-commerce level. I'm looking for a community manager, as well as a New York-based position for the community manager. The e-commerce could be anywhere in the United States, and that's pretty senior. Also looking for somebody who knows the spirits industry side, spirits logistics, and spirits marketing. So please send me your resumes at DSMs.
Yes, people are learning how to secure their seat right now.
That's right.
Tia, I appreciate your time. I thank all of you for joining us Monday at noon. We'll see you next week. And make sure that if you know someone that might fit that bill, make sure you give them that opportunity, because we got to shine together, right? So
yes. Amen.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.